Folks, it's the end of March, which means it's time to head to the ballparks if you are a Reds or Guardians fan, with the spring fall seasons fully in swing if you include FC Cincinnati and the Columbus Crew, who are in MLS. Not only that, the NBA season is drawing to a close, which means the Cavs might find out their seeding and their matchup for the playoffs. Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Buckeye Sports Breakdown, a show about teams from the great state of Ohio. I'm Ahirson Hassan. Thanks for tuning in. We have a lot to get to, so as I say every week, let's get to it. And we'll start off with opening day. And contrary to last year, where we saw the Reds win and the Guardians lose in the first game of the season, both Ohio teams lost this year. The Reds lost 5-4 to the Pittsburgh Pirates, a close game down the stretch, but nonetheless a rough go at it on both sides of the ball for Cincinnati. And speaking of Cincinnati, it almost feels like nobody does opening day the way the Reds do it. You have the parade from Findlay Market going down to the banks, just so many great people there. I saw Benny the Bomber, my high school's mascot. He was there with other GCL schools. It's just something special, simply special about Cincinnati and opening day that I just love about it. I remember going to school, this was back in elementary, and I remember people would be taken out at like 11:30 or 12 o'clock to go to opening day. And I would be like, how in the world are you going that early? The game doesn't start till 4:10. But nonetheless, you see it. And simply put, it's electric. Speaking of electric, Hunter Green was definitely in that category yesterday, firing off 100-mile-per-hour pitches throughout his stint on the mound, including clocking the fastest pitch in MLB history at 105.2 miles per hour. Was going down, it was a ball, but nonetheless, it's what you want to see. When I heard that Hunter Green was going to be the starting pitcher, I knew that we were in for a treat. When you look at the fastballs, you look at guys being struck out, which we saw when Aroldis Chapman was in Cincinnati. But that being said, Green has been kind of a loose cannon. It was the case last year, and it was also the case yesterday as well, as after Oniel Cruz hit a home run for Pittsburgh, then the hits started coming in for the Pirates. Green was pulled as there were two runners on first, and then afterwards, the pitching kind of went haywire for the Reds. Pirates were up 4-1, ended up having a pretty good fifth inning overall. And again, we're able to get those runs back, and you had Vossler with a 2-run triple in the middle. Was a little stinging at the end. I was listening to the game on radio. Props to Tommy Thrall and Reds Cowboy for doing a great job there. But nonetheless, it looked like Will Benson is a great addition for the Reds. He's a solid player. He's got a great personality. I listened to his interview from a few days ago. But it just seemed rough, though. You have bases loaded, 2 outs, struck out swinging. It was just rough overall. And it just seemed like that was the big moment for the Reds to try to get a lead. And hey, if Benson would have gotten a single, it would have been close to about a 6-4 lead. Would have been something, especially in this game overall. But it just seemed like after Green and after a lot of the hitters started to do well, the depth of this team still has some problems. Sure, they have a great farm system. Sure, they have key players. But when it comes to the depth of the team, especially in that pitching position, it just seems like they're missing something. It doesn't seem like the Pirates have gotten better. And of course, the Pirates in ways have kind of shared with the Reds the position of NL Central doormat. And again, the Reds coming off a 100-loss season last year. They have never gone back-to-back 100-loss seasons. In fact, that 100-loss season last year was only the second time in history that happened. The only worst time was in 1982 when they had 101 losses. They got the day off today, and then they're back tomorrow at, I believe, what could be Saturday evening. I don't know if it's 6:40 or 7:10 Eastern, but nonetheless will be opening night for the Reds. So that will definitely be interesting as well. Hopefully the Reds can rally and win the series. On to the Guardians, who have also struggled on opening day in the past few years. They only have one win in the last 5 opening days if you count the result from last night, and that one win came in 2020 when there were no fans in the stands. But it was a pitcher's duel throughout the game until Ty France broke the deadlock in the bottom of the eighth. 3-run homer, and then T-Mobile Park in Seattle just went electric. Mariners ended up beating the Guardians 3-0 in that one. Overall, just a battle down the stretch when you look at the pitchers. Again, Bieber didn't get the losing pitcher ideal. It was actually Kernchak who would get it. But just when you look at the box score of these things, it just seemed consistent throughout. Now, I will say this, though. When it came to being command-wise, it was definitely Castillo who won that battle over Bieber. Bieber allowed 6 hits through 6 innings, 3 strikeouts on the day. Castillo on the other side, 6 strikeouts, 1 hit in 6 innings pitched. And I know for myself, being a Reds fan, I was watching that game thinking, what in the world happened to Luis Castillo? This dude has almost taken it to an entire level from what we saw in his production with the Reds. Take, for example, opening day in 2021 when Castillo was on the mound for the Reds. It almost felt like he started off solid, and then I believe it was the Cardinals that day. They just ran rampant with runs, I believe putting up close to 6 or 7, in my opinion, might have been more. And Castillo was just left in no man's land. In Seattle was not the case at all. They came out firing, and especially with Castillo as well. Contrary to what Seattle's offense looked like, where they got on third base a lot, they had guys in scoring position, but just in the nick of time, the Guardians get the out and it's scoreless. We didn't really see that from Cleveland's offense, and especially from the batters. When you look at guys they have, right? You got Naylor, you've got Ramirez, guys in the front that can really be hard hitters. They were kind of tripped up, and in the case of Ramirez, literally tripped up on a strikeout. And it just seemed like there's not much freedom in that team. It will be interesting to see what happens down the stretch for what's going to happen in this series. I will say, though, for the Guardians, interesting pitching arrangement for this series. It is a 4-game series, meaning they will play tonight. Gaddis will be the starting pitcher for that one. Seiville on Saturday. That one, too, will be on FS1, and then Quantrill will be on the mound Sunday. Simply put, throughout this series, it's going to be an interesting one in general because a lot of people are predicting these two teams to make the wild card. This could easily be a battle we see come October in the playoffs. So that being said, there's going to be a lot of flares firing in this first series. It will feel like a playoff series to some extent for the Guardians. And I think for them, the simplest thing, knowing you're at T-Mobile Park, a park that, although not historically known for being electric, it has come alive and has really shown up in big moments, especially this past year, knowing how the Mariners played. So simply put, throughout this entire series, if you're the Guardians, you have to show up well. And I'm looking at the Mariners pitching crew. You've got Robbie Ray on the mound Friday. That could be interesting. Gilbert on Saturday, Gonzalez on Sunday. So it looks like as we enter the back end of this series, we could see the Guardians start to win that pitching battle. So pitch means to throw the ball in baseball. Pitch in soccer means the field. So let's go from the guys on the field throwing the pitch to the actual pitch in soccer, in MLS overall. And FC Cincinnati, once again, being one of the best teams in the country right now, still unbeaten, one of the 4 teams that hold that category right now. 11 points on the year, second in the East, only to New England Revolution, who have 4 wins in 5. And again, the orange and blue continue to make statement wins. They did it against Nashville 1-0 on the road. Simply put, their grittiness was shown overall. I didn't watch the game, but I remember checking at halftime, and Nashville put up close to double digits in the first half. Not too many of them were on target, though. But nonetheless, the defense was able to remain strong, and I think more importantly, remain possessive in that second half, not let Nashville get through. And on the other side, Cincinnati had 7 shots on target. And I think what we've seen from Cincinnati, and I've talked about it when they started off the year, this is a team that loves to attack, but they're starting to really feel it on the defensive side. And it felt like from what we saw last year, and I think Pat Noonan would agree with me on this one, is this team has offensive potential to go far. The problem with this team is the defense for not holding strong. And we're really seeing this team become gritty. It's started to become part of its personality, and that might be for the worse, but nonetheless, they're really holding strong along with the offense. And the one player in that high powered offense that had yet to score did score on Saturday with Brandon Vasquez. Again, great player, had 18 goals in the year last year, and then also got a call up to the U.S. men's national team. I remember talking about him last week or a couple weeks ago. I can't remember, but I simply said, here's the thing. This guy's going to wake up soon, and I think he's going to have a good day. Boy, he got it. Again, it was a simple tap in off an original Alvaro Barrial shot, but nonetheless put it in the back of the net. And again, it seems like, to quote Matt Doyle, who did the power rankings, he said, this is something we have to accept with Cincinnati. Again, it may not be the most flashiest of wins. And granted, this is a flashy team from what we saw last year, but maybe that's good. Maybe that's good down the stretch for this team. When you look at teams that won the MLS Cup final, up until last year when it was LAFC against the Union, number one seed against number one seed, who won? It was teams like a third seeded teams like Toronto FC. Granted, they didn't win, but they faced a 4 seed Seattle Sounders, who, by the way, were towards the bottom in that year, and then kind of went on an incredible streak to make the playoffs in 2016. You look at other teams that have won it all. You look at NYCFC, I believe they might have been a 4 seed the year they ended up winning. I might have to check, but nonetheless, teams that seemed gritty throughout the year remained competitive, and hey, they ended up getting the key victories when they matter. And again, that's what we've seen out of Cincinnati, especially on the road. It might be why Matt Doyle might have moved them down from 2 to 3. And given that St. Louis has won every single game this year, that to an expansion side that has won every single game this year, major credit to them. That is almost impossible to do in this day and age. And again, I think another thing to note, again, not too many people talk about the media and the fans, but I have to note and give a shout out to Apple TV. You guys have done a great job putting out coverage for Cincinnati. 2 of the last 3 games for the Orange and Blue have been free. It will also be the case this Saturday when they face off against Miami back home at TQL Stadium, which has started to become one of the hardest places to play in the entire country, and especially in MLS. Rematch of the home opener of that great stadium. They've had some interesting battles over the year, including that one on May 16th, 2021. Miami won that 3-2, but it kind of shows it's going to be a mostly offensive game, which might be my one concern for FC Cincinnati. They beat Inter Miami 3-1 at home last year and then drew them 4-4 on the road down in Fort Lauderdale. And again, I watched Miami's game. I watched the highlights, I should say, against Chicago. And again, Mota has really led this team. I believe he might have had a goal in the matchup in Fort Lauderdale last year. Few long shots, but at the same time, Miami's goals allowed. The first one was just numbers going forward. Same for the third. It was a game winner by Kai Kamara in stoppage time. The second one, not much you can do about it from Tehran. Just a great angle on the ball. Just a great angle, a tight one too, and a great finish. But nonetheless, hostile environment at TQL Stadium. Miami's got a few scores unto themselves, not just the midfield, but this is a team that now has Joseph Martinez, who has scored some pretty interesting goals against FC Cincinnati throughout the years. So we move from Cincinnati up the I-71 to Columbus Crew, and again, coming off a rampant victory over Atlanta United 6-1. And simply put, again, Atlanta was coming into this game beating Portland 5-1 on their home pitch. Columbus basically told Atlanta, anything you can do, hey, I can do better. And that's what exactly happened, especially after some tedious work on the road where they seemed winless, trying to gut out some results during that time. You're back home at lower.com field, and boy, do the goals show up big and often as well. Aiden Moore scored. Christian Ramirez with a brace. Great to see him in the action. I remember talking in the offseason saying this was a big signing. It showed this past weekend. Philippe Quinton, Jason Russell Rowe, and Max Arston also scored goals. I should note too, Arston making his MLS debut, making the goal there to make it 6-1 in stoppage time. So far, Columbus doing really well, fifth in the East, 7 points on the year, and all of those wins coming, or rather, all of their home games have ended up in wins. Well, it is true that all of their wins have come at home. They will be at home sweet home on Saturday hosting RSL, 7:30 Eastern per usual according to Apple TV. And again, I watched their game too, and RSL almost played night and day in that game against St. Louis. Played well, had some early attacks. It was 0-0 at half, but then it looked like St. Louis had a defense in that first half, which permitted, or rather prohibited, RSL from scoring some goals. Won't be surprised if RSL gets a goal against Columbus. That might be one focus for the black and gold, just to try to get some defense going forward. But speaking of defense, RSL's defense really fell apart in the second half, allowed 4 goals, a lot of which, I mean, Zach McMath didn't really challenge it. He didn't really dive. He kind of just watched the ball go into the back of the net, just standing there. Same one to his center backs as well. So it was almost a sense of just giving up. And even Pablo Ruiz just gave up the ball to João Klaus on one effort and just slotted it home. Again, you can make the point that St. Louis is getting lucky, but I think it was simply put, they look like the better team, and the defense on the other side just sleepwalked in the second half. Columbus showed against a historical Atlanta side they can get it done. I expect that they will do it on Saturday. Won't be 6 goals, but I still think Columbus will lay it on RSL this weekend. So we're out of MLB, we're out of MLS. Now we go back to the fall spring category, and more importantly, to the Cavs. 48-29 right now, 6-2-3 overall. And believe it or not, that is better than their overall record the last 2 years in the LeBron era. You know what happened those 2 years? The Cavs went to the finals. Didn't win, but went to the finals nonetheless. And so far, this is a team that's remained dominant throughout the year, and it's going to be interesting to see what they do down the stretch. 5 games left, including one tonight against the New York Knicks. That will be at 7:30 Eastern. That's going to be an interesting battle for one reason, because as it stands right now, the Knicks are on the 5th seed and the Cavs are in the 4th seed. So we can easily see that battle being the Cavs' first playoff matchup. Then later on, you'll have Indiana at home, 2 games down in Orlando, one on Tuesday, one on Thursday, before wrapping up with Charlotte at home on April 9th. Again, the biggest question for the Cavs, and the reason why I will address this now, is you only have one game the next time I'll do this episode. One game essentially until the regular season is done, meaning we should know by then where the Cavs stand in terms of their seeding, and more importantly, who do they face. Right now, they're 4th in the East, 7 games behind Milwaukee, who's in 1st. More importantly, 2.5 games behind Philadelphia, who's in 3rd. Again, the Sixers have also remained stagnant, especially in those key moments. They host Toronto tonight. Yes, tonight. They actually have a much tougher schedule than Cleveland does. Milwaukee on the road Sunday, Boston at home Tuesday, Miami at home Thursday. Miami currently in the play-in sector. Atlanta on the road and Brooklyn on the road. Brooklyn's another team that could be on the Cavs watch list. Currently 6th seed overall. So if the Cavs were to leapfrog the Sixers and get that 3rd seed, we could see an interesting battle. And in my opinion, that might be the motive for the Cavs down the stretch. You know, the Sixers have a rough schedule. They're destined, for the most part, destined to drop one. And if they don't drop one, they could be listed as title contenders, in my opinion. When I mean drop one, I mean like against Milwaukee or Boston. If not, keep an eye on the Sixers. But nonetheless, it seems like the Cavs really got to show themselves out. You've got an easier schedule. Make sure you can get that third seed. And more importantly, face a Brooklyn Nets side that has Mikal Bridges and Cam Johnson. Again, I'm doing this in Phoenix. People will say they're great players, but here's the thing. They were side players. I mean, people know they had Devin Booker and Chris Paul, DeAndre Ayton. Those are the star guys in the Suns, not Cam Johnson and not Mikal Bridges. Nonetheless, playing pretty well in Brooklyn, but it just seems like when you compare those star players to guys like Darius Garland, Donovan Mitchell, even down low, and you have guys like Evan Mobley on the ball. That's what seems to show that the Cavs have the stronger pursuit. They have the stronger talent down the stretch. So that's, I think, my motive for the Cavs to actually snatch that third seed if they can, courtesy that they win and the Sixers lose some down the stretch. It is also important to note on who could be the sixth seed, who could be the fifth seed. Currently, the Knicks are in fifth, 2.5 games ahead of the Nets, who are in sixth. I think more importantly is, can the Nets hold on to that sixth seed spot, knowing you're facing, or rather, knowing the Heat are kind of lurking 1.5 games behind them. More importantly, the biggest difference between the sixth seed and the seventh seed is who gets into the play-in. That's a new thing that the NBA is starting to do. And if you're the seventh seed, you'll essentially host the eighth seed in one game. If you win that game, you're into the playoffs as a seventh seed. If you lose, then you will face the winner of the 10 seed, 9 seed game. Right now, that would be Chicago against Toronto in the Eastern Conference. So it will be interesting, again, to see where all these teams end up, especially where the Cavs end up, and again, who they face. I think whoever they face, it will be an interesting battle, but I think if they're facing a team like the Knicks, and I think especially the Nets, it does give this team a better chance of advancing to the conference semifinals. Either way, that's going to be a tough test. You're facing the Bucks, Sixers, maybe, or rather the Celtics, maybe the Sixers. It's going to be a tough test down the stretch against what we're seeing now as blue blood programs, or rather teams in the NBA. Simply put, if you're the Cavs, at least you're saying, at least I'm not in the West, because the Suns, who are the fourth seed right now, they are 5 games ahead of the Utah Jazz, who are second to last. So between the Jazz and the Suns, there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 teams in between. That includes the Clippers and Warriors, who are the 5th and 6th seed, respectively, and all the teams who are on the play-in, plus the Mavericks, who are the last team, or rather the first team out in the Western Conference. So simply put, there's a lot of competition in the West, and I think it's much easier going in the East for the Cavs. They should have a pretty good command. I think if they drop some, like maybe 1 or 2, I'm not that concerned, but down the stretch, I expect them to do well. Maybe they end out in the third, but it would be a tough ask knowing you have the Sixers ahead. But nonetheless, great season for the Cavs, especially knowing that last year they were the 9th seed and lost in the play-in. So that wraps up this episode of Buckeye Sports Breakdown. Once again, thanks for tuning in to the last episode of March. I'm Mahir Hassan, and have a great week.